In Unit 8, we're going to go over several components that make up a good class. We'll include things like warm-ups, workouts, training rotations, and weapons. On page 149, we go into a few of the details of the beginner class. Now, the beginner class was designed to help you not have as much stress for a new student. A lot of times when you get a new student, you might be dealing with other things going on in your school and might not be able to dedicate the time needed to a new student. And we want to make sure that that new student has a great first impression, a great first class. So we've designed this beginner class, and this is a video that they can watch online before they attend, and it will show them a lot of the basics of the Christian Karate program. They'll see kind of some protocol, how we do things, and then some introductions into some of the techniques and terminologies, so that when they visit your class for the first time, they feel a lot more comfortable. They're familiar with some things that are happening. Now, one of the things that you and your team will need to determine is how are you going to use this resource of the beginner class. This is something that we want to allow you as team leaders to make your own decision on as far as the beginner class. Some of you will become very proficient in teaching the beginner class and have several team leaders, and you might choose to just have all of the students come and have their beginner class in person. Now, ideally, that's the best way to go. If you can make it work to where you have enough team leaders that you can dedicate one team leader to new people as they come in, it's always best to have a personal one-on-one beginner class if possible. Now, some of you might be doing this by yourselves in the beginning and you don't quite yet have a team put together. It might be a good option for you to decide that you want to have all of the new students just watch the video beforehand. And so as people ask you, hey, I'm interested in your school, you can direct them to the christiankarate.org website under the New Students tab. They'll go through there and they'll look at the tutorials, the introduction videos and such, and that might be a good policy that you decide that you want to have as well. And you might have a combination of both, depending on the situation. If you're in a season where you have more students and you don't quite have enough time to dedicate to new students, or if the other way around, you're bringing in a lot of new students and maybe have a few key nights where you know you're going to have beginner classes, then you can do it one-on-one. So I would encourage you to think about this beginner class and realize that you do have that option there. You have the option to use it as a resource online and make that maybe mandatory for your students, or you can not use that at all and simply do it personally at your location. So think about those things. We'll be discussing this later on as far as the pros and the cons and both things, and in your weekly video conferences we can discuss this as well, as far as would it work better for maybe a certain individual. Maybe one of you have a reason why you want to do it one way or the other. We'll bring that up and discuss it and share with the other team members that are going through the course so that everybody can get a good idea. But one thing that all of you will need to do, regardless of whatever direction that you go, is you'll need to be very proficient in teaching this beginner class. Even if you choose to, say, make it mandatory and say everybody needs to go to the website and go through the beginner class before they go to the school, there are going to still be times where that doesn't happen. You have somebody that just shows up, maybe a friend. It comes with one of your students or a family member that's there, and they say, hey, I just want to try it right now. And what we don't want to do is necessarily say, no, you can't participate, go home and come back, because it kind of loses the momentum and the enthusiasm. So make sure that you know how to teach this beginner class well, that you can follow the steps and you can take somebody from knowing nothing to where they can know enough to jump into the normal class without being frustrated. Starting on page 156, we have some sample class outlines depending on the length of your class. Now, for some of you, the idea of thinking of making class outlines might be a lot of fun. For me, it has always been a lot of fun to think about what I'm going to be teaching and how I'm going to be teaching it, and putting together drills and ideas and looking at what the students are working on next. For me, that's a lot of fun. But there are people out there that dread this process. We have seen some leadership that they really like to teach, but when it comes to the planning phase of figuring out what they're going to do, it's a struggle for them. And so what we have done is we've put together some sample class outlines based off of the times, and then online on the resource is where we are going to be putting a lot of information over the course of many years of different drill ideas and different ideas of how you can put these components together, because there's not really one that fits for everyone. You'll need to look at your situation and look at your classes, your student types, maybe kids versus adults, your location that you're at, and all of those factors will come together for you to make your own outline. But as you can see here, the outline that we've created is really similar, but yet you can make it work for your location and your specific situation. If you look through these, the basic idea for a class is this. We want to make sure that there's good fellowship beforehand. It's a good idea that if there's some things that need to be prepared, or maybe the room that you're using needs to be rearranged, to get that done well in advance so that you have a good amount of time before class starts for fellowship. This is where the ministry happens. What you don't want to be doing is having to move chairs or move things around all the way up to the time of the class, because then you miss that opportunity to fellowship with your students. So give yourself a window, and it might be different for each of you, but usually about 15 minutes is pretty good, to where you're done with everything else beforehand. Everything's prepped, everything's ready, you have everything ready to go. You personally, you're ready to go, you're in your uniform, and that 15-minute mark, so that when students start showing up, there's that time for the fellowship and for the ministry. When the class starts, one thing that we always want to do is work on the character quality, punctuality. Punctuality is one of our character qualities that we teach, and we always want to make sure that we start on time. Now, for some of you, this might be very easy. For some of you, this might be very difficult. But one thing that you really need to focus on is to make sure you start on time. And most of our schools will have a clock somewhere, or a device, or a watch, and we like to start exactly on time. So as the seconds are clicking down on the clock, the students will be watching, and usually after a course of some time, when students start to realize that I like to start exactly on the second that we're supposed to start, I'll have a student that'll say, 30 seconds, everybody start warming up, or lining up, and they'll start lining up, because what I expect for my students is that right when the second happens, I bring them to attention. And if somebody is not lined up and ready to go, then we simply follow the discipline policy and they'll get some motivators. Usually, depending on the class, if somebody is late and the whole group was working together, I'll just give everybody a motivator. We'll just drop down and start doing motivators together to remind them of punctuality. So we're going to start on time. We'll bow in. This time might be time for some quick announcements. Maybe something that's going to be happening this weekend, or something that did happen. So just some really short announcements. We want to go over the character quality of the month together, quote that together as a class at the beginning of every class. Then we want to spend time in just a short time of prayer. Now this prayer doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out prayer, but just a short, sincere prayer, asking God for protection, for safety, thanking Him for this opportunity that you have to train there. Give God the glory for what you're doing. And then you're going to jump right into warm-ups. We're going to get to warm-ups here in a little bit as far as the dynamics of that, but you're going to have a good warm-up, and that warm-up will change a little bit depending on what you're doing that day, and possibly how warm or cold it is. Then, after the warm-ups, hopefully, the warm-ups and the workout was enough that they need a quick water break. And so make sure that those warm-ups and workouts, they should be sweating at the end of that. That should be a good workout. Give them a quick 1 to 2 minute water break. Again, this is some time for some fellowship. This is a time for them to say hi to each other, have some fellowship, get some water, towel off if needed, and jump right back in. Now the next section of class is usually dedicated toward technique time. We'll go over some ideas as far as the different techniques, but depending on your time, you're going to maybe have 1, 2, or 3 different technique segments that you can work on. This is also a good time if you have multiple groups as far as rank groups. You might have a white belts, yellow belts, orange belts, etc., where you can break them up into groups. And if you're by yourself, you could assign each group something to do to get started with. You could say, okay, yellow belts, you're going to be working on this technique. Orange belts, you're going to be working on this technique. And then you go and work with the white belts. You'll spend maybe about a minute with the white belts, seeing how they're doing, give them some technique ideas and tips, give them an assignment to work on, and then you move to the next one, and then move to the next one. And as one instructor, you could easily handle 10 to 15 students that way, rotating around. So at this point, you'll have your 1, 2, 3, or 4 drills, different ones that you've planned, that you have prepared. And then at the end of class, one thing that has kind of become kind of an association tradition is at the end we bring everybody together, and everybody including maybe the beginner class. If you had somebody over there that was going through the beginner class, maybe you have a group of kids, maybe a group of adults, whatever people you have there, everyone comes together and usually sits off to the side. And this is a time for demonstration. Now, depending on your time, it might be 5 minutes, might be 10 minutes, might be 3 minutes. But this is an opportunity to where somebody can get up and demonstrate what they've been working on. Now, some days you might say specifically, I want somebody to show me what we worked on today. Or you might say, I just want anybody to demonstrate anything they're working on. So it might be a kata that somebody's working on, or a form, or a sparring session, or something of that sort. So they can come up and they'll come up to the front, they'll bow to the instructors, announce what they're going to do, they do their thing, and then at that point, it's not a time for critiquing, really. It's not a time for teaching, it's a time of encouragement. It's really what it is. If somebody has enough endurance and patience and the willingness to get up in front of the class, and they try and they don't give up, then that should be rewarded. Even if the technique is poor, that's okay. They got up there, they're showing what they worked on, and what needs to happen next, the whole group needs to clap and say, good job. We're congratulating them for getting up there and trying something in front of the group. So they'll get up there, they'll do the thing, and they'll sit down, and the next person will come up. And depending on the time that you have, you might be able to get through 1 to 5 people. Now, it's really neat to see when this is done right, where you have a new student that comes in. They've been through the beginner class, and I usually like to call them up. I will look at them, and depending on the person, if we have somebody that's just really shy, we might not do that person, but usually most people are okay. And I'll say, okay, so-and-so, come on up. They were new here today, and everybody's and their eyes are big, and they're kind of nervous, and they're not sure what's happening, and they get up here, and you have them demonstrate something that they did well in the beginner class. And it's usually going to be something like, let's do a high block, standing high block, just right where they're at, or just a standing punch, something super simple. They're going to do it 5 times, 10 times, kia, and then at that point, everybody's going to erupt in clapping and good job and smiles, and it's really neat to see their eyes. At first they were really scared, and they get up there and they do it, and then they realize that, wow, these people around me genuinely care for me, and I did a good job, and I feel good. And their eyes go from scared to excitement, a smile, and they go sit down, and that will encourage them to stick with it. The same is true even for your green belt, or for your black belt, or for your advanced class. The opportunity to get up and to just demonstrate something is a great opportunity at the end. So make sure you include that at the end, just a little bit of demonstration time, and make sure, again, it's not a time for critiquing, it's a time for encouragement. At the end of that, you'll line everybody back up, and you might want to, at the end, remind them of a special event maybe that's coming up. You might say, oh, remember tomorrow we're going to be bowling, or we're going to the park, or whatever we're doing. And then it would be good maybe to review the character quality real quick at the end. Say, character quality of the month, review the character quality, and then you bow them out, and we're done. At the end, we need to have a time of fellowship. Now, if possible, have a long time for fellowship, but it really will depend too on a lot of factors at the local setting. You might have another group that's coming in that you need to get out quickly, but if possible, try to have a good solid 10-15 minutes of just fellowship time. If you do have to have a time where you have to change things, maybe by rearranging some furniture, chairs, or things of that to get ready for another event, you might want to do that real quick as a group and then have some dedicated time for fellowship. So that's it, generally, the structure of the class. I would encourage you to look through these class outlines, look through the resources online, and start thinking about, how am I going to put this class together? Remember, again, that these are just suggestions, ideas, kind of some basic guidelines, and you as a leader have the ability to do it however you'd like to at your location. But remember, a lot of these things that we've mentioned here, we have them there because they work. They're true and tried and tested. We've done this for a long time. We've tried a lot of different things, and we found that this model works really well. So use these tools, think about those, and start writing up ideas, especially writing up the ideas for the first month of your class. First several months where, what drills am I going to do? Because you know the material that they're going to go through, because everybody in the beginning will be a white belt. They will know nothing, and they'll be starting on this journey. So you'll be able to take your yellow belt material, and you'll be able to go, okay, everybody's going to be doing this and this and this. Start writing it out. Start getting a good idea. Look at the resources and enjoy your classes. Really enjoy them. And enjoy planning out your classes. Because remember what you're doing. We're not just teaching karate. We have this opportunity to minister to somebody and to possibly bring them into a relationship with the Lord. That is just the most exciting things that we can do as leaders and ministers, is to bring somebody to the Lord. And then we have an opportunity to take those people that are believers and to help them to grow in their faith. So remember, that's why we do this. That is the main reason. And this schedule, and as you plan it, will help you to do that more effectively. On page 160, we have an outline of the warm-ups. Now, by this point in your training, you should have gone through the warm-ups several times in the yellow belt training videos. Hopefully, you've gone through them and you haven't skipped them. If you've skipped them, I would encourage you not to do that anymore. One of the reasons we have those in there is so that you can start learning how to do these warm-ups. I would encourage you, maybe as you see the warm-ups, to count along with them. Get used to saying what the movements are and counting along with the video, so that when you in turn have to do these warm-ups, it's a lot easier. But I want to talk real quick about what are the warm-ups and why are they so important. We cover this a little bit in the book, but I want to talk about it because it is so important. The warm-ups have a very specific purpose, and we want to make sure that as you give these warm-ups to your students, that you're fulfilling that very specific purpose. The purpose of the warm-ups is to warm up your body and get it limber to where it prevents injury. That's really the key thing, is we want to prevent injury. A lot of the movements that we do are quick, and if your muscles aren't warm, it could cause more injury, whereas if your muscles are cold. So the idea behind the warm-ups is this. We want to raise the temperature, the body temperature, slightly. And by doing that, it will make it to where it's less likely to have an injury. Now, in addition to raising the body temperature, we want to move our body around. Just by the act of moving, we call it warming up, but by moving around and getting that muscle group warm, it will help prevent injury in the future. Now, this warm-up that we have is a good overall basic warm-up. It kind of covers a little bit of everything. And by the end of this, most people will be warmed up. Now, we say most people because sometimes if somebody has a special need, maybe a previous injury, they might need to warm up a little bit more in a specific area, maybe their legs or their hips or their shoulder. Also, This is a good warm-up in most weather conditions as far as if you're indoors. Now remember, what we want to do is we want to raise the body temperature up a little bit. Now some of you might be in a spot that is very cold, where it's cold all the time, all year round, and it takes a little bit longer to get warmed up. Even if you go inside and there's some heat on, you're just a little bit cold all the time, especially in the winter times, you might need to take this warm up and expand everything slightly. Instead of doing 10, you're going to do 12 or 15. And you'll find over the course of time that you'll need to adjust that based off of your location. The same is true if you are in a tropical area and the weather is maybe very warm, or maybe it's in the 80s or 90s or 100s in Fahrenheit, and you might find that I'm already really warm, and what you can do is adjust that. You'll still need to do some mobility with your muscles and such, but that warm-up won't necessarily need to be as long. So think about these things as you do your warm-up. Do the warm-up where you're at, and think to myself, is this accomplishing the goal of warming up? Do I feel warmer? Am I starting to sweat? Do I feel like I can move around a bit? And if not, think about things that you'll need to change in your warm-up in your area to make it to where you will be warmed up when you're there. Also, a few things at the end is we do include some workout things. Now, I would encourage you to make sure that you get at least that in, if not more. So usually what we like to do is like to have a good warm-up to where we are warm and we can move around a little bit better, and then have a good solid dedicated time of conditioning. So we can include some of the things that are there. Look on the online resources for other conditioning, because there's a lot of conditioning things that we can do. The other consideration too with the warm-ups is this. If you're going to be doing some techniques that require one specific part of your body to be more flexible and to be more warmed up than others, what you might want to do is include that in your warm-up. So if you, for instance, are going to be doing a day of a lot of kicks, you might spend a little extra time on all of those elements that require kicks. So the leg stretches and the hip stretches and things like that. Instead of maybe doing a 5 count or 10 count, bump that up to a 15 count. And it might also be appropriate too to do the whole thing, including the workout, and then spend just a few more minutes on a specific leg warm-up exercise to help you get ready for that. So keep those things in mind as you do this warm-up. Make sure that you are going over that and that you're ready, because part of your team leader video test will be these warm-ups. So make sure you got them down and make sure you can do them well. On page 164, we have a sample idea for weeks 1, 2, and 3 for a rotation for how you would teach different segments of the karate. Now, one thing that I want to point out that was an important addition, as we found out, is, as you can see on weeks 1 through 3, we have a class B, and this is where if you were teaching, say, a Monday, Thursday, so the second class of the week, is we have contact drills. So you can see that Class A dealt more with basic drills, things where they're by themselves, maybe up and down the floor, katas, forms, combinations, etc. But then Class B was dedicated to contact drills. Now, we have seen over the course of time that every individual is going to kind of maybe lean one direction or the other on what they like to do. Where we have some people that really like to do the forms, the katas, the basics, and not so much the contact drills. And then we have another group of individuals that really like the contact drills, but they don't like the basics as much. They don't like maybe the technical issues and the precise training that requires of the basics. And we've seen over the years where schools might just tend to lean as well, the whole school in one direction or the other. Where we might have a school in the past that the instructor or the leader didn't like doing contact drills as much, and so he mainly taught the basics, and their katas were great. The technique was sharp, they looked really good, but then when it came time to doing contact drills, they were really bad. All the students just really suffered as far as their skill level. And the same is true. We found other schools that would just do a lot of contact drills, and when it came to fighting and tournaments and such, they were great in that aspect, but when they went over to the kata or the basics, they suffered. And so we found something that works really well is to make sure that you focus on both of them. And it's usually good to have one class that's dedicated towards contact drills and one that's not. That also allows for your students to make sure they bring the necessary gear. If they know that every Thursday they're going to be doing contact drills, they'll make sure that they have their gear for that. Now, what you'll need to do as a leader is you'll need to identify which one maybe you struggle with and make sure that you don't skip that or overlook that. Use this as a guide. In the beginning, I would highly recommend that you teach 2 times a week and that you have one that's dedicated towards the basics and one that's dedicated towards the contact drills. We need to make sure that we have both. The students and the schools that do both make better martial artists. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we can have both sections that work really well. So really work on that contact section and really work on that basic section. One thing that I do want to point out too is that there shouldn't be any free sparring for students or team leaders below the rank of green belt. Now, free sparring is where you have your hand pads on and you just fight, and there's no predetermined moves. It's not like 5-step where you're going front and back. It's free sparring and anything can happen. And right now, we're going to say no until you at least get to a green belt. And the main reason for that is safety. As you move on in your training, you're going to find that people that are in the beginning phases, yellow, orange, and such, a lot of them will lack control. And even though we have protection and things of that sort, if you get into a free sparring situation, sometimes people get a little excited, and that's where the injuries happen. And so we want to make sure that we don't do that in the beginning. But make sure that you push the contact section of it. That's why we're there. This is karate. We hit each other. We block each other. This is part of what we do. So make sure that you incorporate both of those. Now, if you're only going to be doing maybe one class a week because of the situation that you're in, come up with a way that you can have a section of it dedicated towards contact. Or you might do alternating weeks, where one week you have basics and such and katas and forms, and then the next week will be contact. So think about those things as you do your planning and make sure that you get both of those elements in your classes. On page 166, you can see the weapons overview. Now in our program, we have incorporated the training of weapons. Now if you think about it, and if you know your Japanese history, the term karate means the art of the empty hand or the open hand. This was traditionally used as fighting without weapons, and you can look through the history of karate as far as why that was developed as such. But in its truest form, karate does not include any weapons. The weapons training is actually called kabuto, and kabuto is another art form that focuses on the weapons, whereas karate just focuses on the hand or the open hand without weapons. Over the course of time in Christian karate, we saw that students had a desire to learn some weapons. And a lot of people really don't understand the difference between the two. They think about karate or martial arts, and they automatically think of maybe things they've seen in movies, and a lot of the times weapons were introduced. And so we don't necessarily need to correct our students and say, no, this is karate and that's kabuto. We don't really need to worry about that. But you need to have that knowledge in case somebody does ask you where if they are familiar with the terms of karate and kabuto. What we've decided to do is to introduce some weapons training at different ranks, starting at orange belt. Now we decided to start at orange belt because there's enough in the yellow belt material. The student is going from really knowing nothing to knowing quite a bit. And so starting at orange belt, we have started a little bit of training in the nunchucks. Now you can look through here in the pages kind of to see the weapons that we'll be teaching. Again, these are more of just an introduction. They'll learn a few basic things per rank, and then kind of a mini kata or form, and then move on to the next one. There are opportunities, though, for you as team leaders and instructors in the future to maybe teach a specialty class just for a specific weapon. So as you go through this training, you might find that you have a specific weapon that you really like and that you want to get really proficient at. And then you can be offering that as a specialty class at your location. One thing I do want to point out is this. Not all of these weapons will be available or legal in all of the areas around the world. For instance, the first one, the nunchucks, we have some places that are here in the United States and some other countries to where nunchucks are illegal. And so if you come to a spot in your training where there is a weapon that is not available or it's not legal in your country, then you just won't teach that. Okay. What you can do possibly is look for an alternative weapon that's maybe available or legal. And if it isn't legal, make sure you contact headquarters and let them know. Say, hey, we cannot teach this weapon, and maybe provide a few alternatives, because you will know more so the laws of your location than we will. So you could say, this weapon isn't legal or available, but here's a few other alternatives that might work. And then we'll help and recommend and guide you into a suitable substitute for those weapons. But take a look at those. These should not be the primary focus of your classes. These should just be a supplement. And if it ever gets to where it is not a supplement, but where it becomes a primary focus of a student, then you need to dial it back and concentrate on the karate material. So remember, it should be a supplement. It should be just as an extra. Also, take this into consideration. If you have a student that maybe is struggling with a specific weapon or such for coordination or just for whatever reason, it shouldn't be something that prevents them from getting their rank in their karate technique. So you have some ability to guide the weapons program one way or the other. It should be something that is an addition, something that is a good enhancement to your program, and it shouldn't be something that takes away from your program. So take a look at the weapons and have a lot of fun with those. It can be a really neat part of your program. This is the end of Unit 8. Now, if you haven't looked at your homework already, I would encourage you to take a look at your homework, because there's a lot of things that you need to do this week that necessarily you wouldn't have done previous weeks. You'll need to go through the beginner class. You'll need to be teaching some people the beginner class. You'll need to be going through the warm-ups. Take a look at this, and you might need to find a friend or a family member or somebody around your area to be able to be involved with these things, because you'll need to be able to teach these elements to them. Now, think about this. At this point, you might be going through the class, and it's only you as far as a team leader, and you might be seeing the importance, hopefully you are, of more team leaders. This right here, this homework, might be a great opportunity for you to recruit some team leaders for the future. You might be thinking about somebody that maybe is in your community or your church or around you, that they might be somebody that I might be able to work with. They might be interested. This is a great door, a great tool to open that up just to see if it's a possibility. You can go to them and say, hey, I really need somebody I need to teach somebody just a little bit as part of my homework. Can you help me out? And hopefully they'll say, yeah, that's great. I can come help you out. And they come over and they go through the course, and it opens up the door to where maybe you can share with them about the Christian karate and about what you're doing, and maybe possibly invite them to be a team leader as well. Take some time on this homework. Make sure you do this homework well, because this is starting to get into the practical things. Remember, knowledge does not equal experience. This right here is where you're starting to get that experience. So make sure you go through this and that you feel really comfortable with this week's homework.